Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 10. In this lesson, we're going to answer the question, how do I evaluate a job opportunity? So you have an opportunity. Someone has said, yes, come on in for an interview. You talk it through, and maybe even they offer you the position. Opportunity is different, and what is good for one person isn't good for another. So let's talk through the different pieces. First, the essential bits, okay? And the first one is, can you afford to take the job? Now, if you have no job, then maybe you can afford to take a lower paying job. But sometimes a job will give you the work you need, but it won't pay enough that you can actually live on it. Okay, and now that again is going to be different for every area, different for every person. If you have a lot of debt, whether it's college debt or credit card debt or whatever debt it is, that may change which jobs you can take. If the job doesn't pay enough to meet your needs, or the amount of hours you have to work doesn't allow you to work a second job if you need to, then maybe you can't take it. So first evaluate, can I even afford to take this job? It doesn't matter what the opportunity is. If you This is a tricky balancing point, because when you're going into a new job, it's a new environment with a new code base you've never worked with before, and it may be overwhelming. It most likely will be overwhelming. I'm talking about here. You're going to have to learn that. You're going to have to grow in that. You're going to have to figure out how to work with their code base. And that's just a normal part of being employed. However, the other part of this is they're asking you to write really senior level C# stuff that you've never done before, and maybe you try to do it and you can't figure out how to even do it. That might not be the right job for you at this time. Even if they were to hire you, it might actually be a bad experience for you, where it wouldn't be 6 months, a year, or 2 years down the road. So balance the on one hand, the fear of a new code base or a fear of a new environment. That's all okay, but don't let it overly concern you. But balance that with the reality of, can you do what they're asking? If they're asking for a hardcore web developer and you've never developed for the web, you have to be upfront with that and say, I have never developed for the web. Set expectations. It may mean you don't get the job, but if you got the job, you might not do very well, or you might not succeed. And there is an element of taking a leap, where you go from what you've known and kind of stretch yourself a little bit. But there's a difference between stretching yourself and promising what you cannot deliver. Don't promise what you can't deliver. Is the commute possible? This is something that people often overlook. It's a great job, but it's an hour and a half away, or it's an hour away. I have a friend who he ends up working far enough away, a couple hours away, that he spends overnight for multiple nights a week at his job. For my lifestyle. If you are taking care of your parents or your grandparents and you need to be home, or you have young kids and you need to be home to help out with them, If you're spending an hour or 2 hours a day on the road on top of 8 or 10 hours a day at work, that might not be possible for your situation. So take that into consideration. Take into account the expense as well. If you're going to drive that distance, you've got the wear and tear in your car and the fact that your car is not available for your spouse. If your spouse is sharing the same car you are. If you're taking the train or the subway or public transportation, can you for this company? Whether it's the time or the money or both that's going to take to commute to your job. This is a big one. Can you support the mission of the company? Now, I would say 95% of the time, this is a non-issue. Most of the time, you're working for a company that creates products or creates services or does something that's just fine. But there are times when the company may fundamentally not be in line with who you are as a person. That may be okay for you, but it may not. And it may be that 6 months down the road, you're just not feeling good about it. And at that point, and so it's going to put that pressure on you of you don't feel good about this, but you also don't feel like you can leave right now. And that's not a good place to be. So be careful that the mission of the company doesn't conflict with you on a moral basis. Okay, so those are the absolutes. Here are the relative things. This is relative to you that you can think through. The first one, your current job on a 1 to 10 scale. And you say, you know what, it's pretty awful. 1 being horrible, 10 being amazing. Two to a 5 is a big improvement. And so maybe it doesn't tick all the boxes that you want, but it's a whole lot better than where you were. So sometimes it's a matter of perspective, a matter of relativity. Yes, this is not the greatest job in the world. Yes, there's some downsides, but the downsides are a lot less than this job over here, my current job. And if you're unemployed, so there is some relative weight to this. So don't always look for, here's my ideal, and that's all I'll do. Obviously, if you can get your ideal, go for it. Just don't turn down an improvement because it's not enough of an improvement with all else being equal. Think that through and be honest about, can I get everything I want, or can I settle for this for now? Quality of life. What will be your quality of life? People often overlook this. So let's just say you're making $30,000. And that's a real big draw. I get it. And again, if financially $30,000 a year is really tight and you really need some flex, maybe $45,000 is going to be a big deal for you. But and I am still growing as a developer. I can continue to move up. I can continue to find better and better jobs down the road. But in the meantime, my life isn't miserable. Don't put your life on hold forever in pursuit of a dollar. I am done commuting to work. That's my line. I've crossed over where I have the skills and abilities to work remotely, and I have the skills and ability to say, I will only work remotely and make it stick. And I did that because of quality of life. I used to commute an hour or 45 minutes to work each way. And that just took extra time out of my day. It wasn't ideal. And so if you're working an 8-hour day and you're adding 2 hours onto that, now it's a 10-hour day. That's 2 extra hours away from my family. That's 2 extra hours away from the rest of my life because my job is not my life. And so think those things through. At first, you'll have to make some quality of life sacrifices. You'll have to say, I'm going to commute, or I'm going to work at a job. Again, maybe it's a 5. Maybe it's not the greatest job, but it's not a 2. And so as you grow and as you cross over the money threshold where you make enough money, and that is a luxury, where you make enough money to live on. Once you cross that, then you need to start thinking about quality of life, not just more money. Because more money will not provide more happiness. The quality of life is very important. All right. So what does this step do for your career? You have to think about you. And we'll talk more of this later. But you are responsible for your own career. You're responsible for your growth as a developer. You're responsible for making sure that you don't stagnate, to making sure that you continue to be more and more valued in your industry. Expecting somebody else to do it for you is a recipe for disaster. There's very few places, very few people, very few managers that do a great job of looking out for you specifically and individually. There's some great managers out there. There really are. But they're more interested in helping you as a person grow in the company, not necessarily in helping you as a person grow as a developer and grow your career, where maybe you take your skills different weights between the two. You're looking at quality of life and it's pretty similar, and the salary/benefits are pretty similar. Think about which one is going to look better on your resume, which one is going to push you into more of what you want to do. Bigger role somewhere else. Okay, so what does this step do for your career? And maybe you don't ever want to leave, but there's a ladder inside the organization that allows you to progress up to your eventual goal. Maybe your eventual goal is just to be a senior developer. Maybe you want to eventually move into management and be a software development manager. Is there a career path for that? Or is there something that will help you when you're looking to be moving on to a different company that would provide that you can point back to and say, this do you fit well with the team and management? If you don't fit well with your coworkers or your future coworkers, if your manager rubs you the wrong way or doesn't seem to appreciate people or is a little rough around the edges, that may make for a difficult working environment, and that may reduce your quality of life. It may add friction to your day, add stress. These things can be difficult. Maybe your team is all leaders and you want to be a leader. Well, that's hard because you don't have the ability to kind of rise above necessarily. Maybe it'd be better if you have people that work better and mesh more as following each other, where you can lead. Or maybe it's just the fact that, all your coworkers love rugby and you love baseball. Maybe you just don't fit there, and maybe that's okay. Maybe you can learn to love rugby and they can learn to understand at least baseball. There's some give and take here. But if you get a really bad feeling about a manager or go, eesh, when you hear how they interact with other people, that's going to be you someday if you work for them. Think that one through. Okay? Figure out if you can handle that. Don't look at the rosy side of things, because you start off, when you're being hired, you're being interviewed, you're getting the best picture possible of the organization. And of course, you're getting the best possible picture of you. At some point, it becomes you see the normal picture of both life, and they see the normal picture of you. Is that going to cause friction in the organization? If it is, that might not be the position for you. All right, so these are the items that I recommend you evaluate. 1, the language you work with. I've been hired at organizations where I said, I'm a C# developer, I know these things, and they said, great, we're moving to C#. And we currently work with this, but you'll be moving right to work in this other language. Know that going in. Know what you're working with, and be very sure it is what you want to do, and is what you're comfortable with, and is what you like to do. The state of the code base. If you can, during the interview process, especially near the end where you're kind of saying, yeah, that's probably a company I want to work for, see the code. At least see the flow of how the code works and what it looks like and how you interact with it, because that will tell you a lot about an organization. Look at their code. If the code is an absolute mess and they're bringing you in, that's a warning flag. Now, that's also an opportunity. I have had my best success working for companies where their code base is a mess, because I was able to come in and have to live in the mess, and you have to be okay with that. And if you can't be okay with that, don't work there. I had coworkers that one organization I worked at that just couldn't handle it, and they literally quit or got fired because they couldn't handle the idea that the code wasn't in the perfect state they wanted it to be in. But if you can live in that mess and you can say, here's how I can incrementally make this better, then you can be the hero that makes the organization more efficient, more effective, and the code better. And you can be recognized as the key player at the organization. So it can be a benefit or a curse. All right. Again, the team you'll work with, evaluate them. Figure out, can I fit in here well? Is this a team I want to be with day in and day out? I have gone interviews and I have worked with people where I said, you know what? I would not work with you. I'm very kind about it. But there are certain people where I work with them for a little bit for me. I turned out a great job where I talked to the boss and it all sounded great. And I talked to the team members and it was like they were whipped puppies. They almost, with their eyes, told overbearing boss who has unreasonable expectations. And so that right there told me I can't work for this person. So evaluate the management. Make sure you do that. Don't just look at the figure out what are the key pieces of information. How will I know if I'm doing a good job? Now, this is important to know once you've started a job too. Know what the benchmarks are, because they may be different than what you think they are. Evaluating a developer is hard because there aren't good, clear metrics. If you worked in a warehouse and you took boxes and put them on trucks, you could be evaluated based upon how many then you are slower than your coworker. And that could be an evaluation, and say, well, why is your coworker faster than you? And you can work through some ideas, and maybe you're just not as good a worker, or maybe there's a reason for it. But there's that clear metric you can look at. Number of trucks loaded. In software development, there isn't that clear metric. And sometimes organizations put metrics that are just silly. And I understand why, because they're trying to figure out some way to evaluate a coder, a developer. And so sometimes you'll hear things like, well, we evaluate based upon the number of lines of code written. That's a horrible evaluation, because honestly, a good senior level developer will write few lines of code, where a beginner or intermediate level developer might write hundreds of lines of code. Is a senior developer worse than the junior developer? No, they're actually doing a better job. But the lines of code don't show that. But if you But if you're being evaluated on lines of code, you need to think that through and maybe change how you're doing things. And yes, that does not feel good. And it feels like gaming the system. But what else are you going to do? It's not a to work there. You're going to have to make some decisions about how you change things. Sometimes you'll be evaluated based upon the number of bug fixes you put into place. I worked in an organization like that once, and it was silly because I was talked about this. They said, you're not doing enough fixes. Well, I spent a week working on this pretty intense system. The next week, there was a bug fix where we had to fix one line of code in multiple different areas. Well, I created a bug fix entry for every single one of those. And so I had, I think, 30 or 40 different bug fixes that literally took me probably 20 minutes to do. But I was commended for how much work I was doing, because all they looked at was that number. And so you have to know that, and you have to adjust. So up front, if you know how you'll be evaluated, you can evaluate if you can properly act in that environment. And you'll also know what's expected of you. So when you walk in day one, you'll know what you need to do to be seen as effective. Okay? And again, right or wrong, that's the way you're being evaluated. Therefore, you have to change to make sure that you're being seen as effective, not just being effective. Okay, perks of the job. This is something else to evaluate. Yes, money is important because without money, you can't eat. So there is that baseline. Like I said, there's a level at which you say, this is how much money I have to make in order to. One of them is the perks of the job. So in the US, we don't have a universal healthcare system. So healthcare is a big one. How much am I paying for healthcare? Or how much does my healthcare cover? Does it cover my family? Does it cover dental and vision and all these things? That's a big one. But another one is, do you contribute to retirement? How many days off do I get? I interviewed at a company once where everything looked great. I mean, the job was interesting. The code base was neat. The output we were creating, what they were creating, looked like something I really get behind. I actually wanted to even promote it because it was really cool. And then we talked through the salary. The salary looked great. And then I said, okay, let's talk about benefits. How many days off? Right there is a big red flag. You're expecting me to work 5 days a week for 52 weeks and have very few days off in between. Maybe at the beginning you do that, but after just a little bit, you need to have time off. You have to have that mental break. As a software developer, you have to be able to clear out your brain, to reset, to have a week vacation, to just decompress. That's a big deal. Then I asked about how many hours a week do they work. And the response wasn't a number. It was we work pretty hard around here. The overall machine of the organization. And to some extent, that's okay. But an employee has to have more than work. Because unless you are a subsistence living, unless you are at the very bottom, barely making it, and I understand some people are, and if that's where you're at, you gotta do what you gotta do. But if you are able to make enough money to pay your bills, then you need to have that mental break on nights, on weekends, on holidays, on days off, where again you can clear your brain out, where you can relax and reset, because that reset is really important to making you a better developer. So part of the perks you need to look for is how many hours a week am I expected to work, and how many days off a year am I given. Those two things are important. If they're going to just run you into the ground, then discard you for a new developer, that's probably not an organization you want to be in unless you're using it as a stepping stone. So, perks of the job, pretty important. All right, final one is kind of low on the list, but the amount of training you'll be provided. As a developer, you have to continually grow. Things are changing all the time. So .NET 3.0 came out in September of 2019, and .NET 3.1 came out, I believe, in November. It's only a few months. There's a new version. And that kind of movement happens a lot. And that's just with .NET. We're talking about, you've got open source projects, and you've got libraries, and you've got different third-party applications. All these things can to maintain and improve yourself as a developer, because that makes you more valuable to the organization, but it also makes you more valuable in the workplace. And what I mean, the difference is you could go somewhere else with those skills. So the first part though, more valuable in the organization, that's something your organization should care about. They should value the idea that you want to grow as a developer. So bring that up right away. Talk about how are you don't do anything. You probably want to see that as at least a yellow flag, if not a red flag. Then that's not a good thing, because they're not caring to see the overall team. They kind of stopped learning. They kind of stopped growing and said, this is what we're good at, and we're going to continue to do this and continue to do it and continue to do it. And pretty soon, I mean, I'm really afraid for those developers because they don't know anything outside their own system now. And they don't really fit in with the rest of the world. So you go somewhere else as a developer, you may be a senior developer and learn a lot. Yes, you know logic, and that's really important, and that really is 80%. But you don't have even the 20. Not because you want to just get money out of them, but because it's important for you as a developer. And pitch it this way. You want me to grow as a developer because I become more valuable to you. And if that's important to you, then you need to help me grow. But commit. Either way, I'm going to grow. It will be that much easier and faster if I can grow with your help. But either way, I'm going to grow. Okay? So that's the final item to evaluate when you're thinking through an offer or thinking through a position. To make all the choices we talked about so far. But once you're able to make any choice at all about which job to get or about how to evaluate a job offer, pay is important, but just to a point. And then you need to consider not sacrificing your quality of life for a few more dollars. Okay? Your quality of life is important. So don't sacrifice it for a few more dollars. All right. So with that, let's go to your homework. And your homework is to identify of these are the things I will not move on. I must have $30,000 a year. Otherwise, I can't make it. I can't live. Okay? Now, you may say I must have 30,000, but I would really like 45,000. So that's your starting point. But that way you know if they say, yeah, we can't do that, but we can do 35. Then you know vacation off, or I must have a month vacation off, whatever it is for you, but list, here's how much vacation I must have off. And I would also list, here's how many hours a day maximum I'm willing to give. I'm going to give a maximum of 8.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's it. List those as your non-negotiables, whatever those are. I must have health insurance, or I must have whatever it is. But then list your desired perks in order of importance. So again, $30,000 is the must-have. Desired perk, $45,000. That's the most important. You want to have that. But maybe the next most important perk is you have a training environment or ability to do training at the organization. Maybe below that is an on-site gym. I mean, whatever it is, have your list of perks and say, okay, these are the things in order of importance. And then when you're evaluating a job, you can use and they've met 2 out of the 5 top desired perks. Well, you could work on then the 3rd desired perk and say, okay, I would like to have this, perk number 3 and number 4. These are pretty important to me. And then you can negotiate that. And then you feel comfortable because you know that you've met your baseline. You know that you've met, let's just say, come back and say, we'll give you 1 out of those 2. Well, now you have 3 out of your top 5 desired perks. That's pretty important. All right. So figure out what that list is. So going in, you know that. And then you can talk more intelligently about what you want. Because if you go in and you don't know what your top perks are, you don't know because you must have this and you're not getting it. That's not good. So when I worked at that, when I that's non-negotiable. So I pushed back and said, can I get 3 weeks vacation? No. I don't want to work here. Okay? That was, and I go, again, I had the luxury of saying no. But I knew this was on my non-negotiable list. And so because of that, I was able to very quickly evaluate this job and not go, well, it's a really great opportunity and this, nope, I have a non-negotiable list and that was on it and you didn't meet that and you won't meet that. Therefore, this is not the job for me. And the reality is, I got a great job somewhere on my want to have, my desired perks. Now, they didn't meet some of the things lower in my list of desired perks. And some people would go, whoa, why did you choose that? Well, because they met all of my non-negotiables and my top things on my desired perks. One of the top things on my desired perks was that they respected my and I need to have time to recharge. I need to have time to spend time with my family. And that was something very high on my desired perk list. And right out of the gate, right in the conversation, they indicated that they were all about that. Huge. So even though I wasn't getting other perks that I wanted, I knew that was my top perk and you met it. And so that right there told me this is a good opportunity. So create that list, identify what's non-negotiable, get paid $20,000 a year because I can't afford anything less. And and then maybe all there's on the list. And then your desired perks are time off, any, and $30,000 a year. That'd be awesome. And so on. And that may be what you start with. But then as you get work experience, your next job, your baseline might be $30,000 a year and a week's vacation. Your nice to have, $45,000 a year and 2 weeks vacation. Okay? And so that list will change over time. Okay? But for now, create that list. Know what you want going in. Know what you have to have going in. That will make the decision a whole lot clearer. It will cut down the number of applications you need to make. And while you may have to make some adjustments down the road, if you find it's not realistic, at least be clear on that. So if you say, you know what, my must-have is $100,000 a year, and you find the market just doesn't pay that in this area, especially not for your skill set, then you know you have to change your expectations. All right? Or do something to make it so that you're attractive to a company paying $100,000 a year. But at least if you have that list and you know what you want going in, you know how to make a decision. All right? So that's your homework. Once you've done that, come on back for the next video.